The bell above the front door chimed softly as another customer stepped into Brooks Market, a small neighborhood convenience store tucked between an old laundromat and a family-owned bakery in a quiet American town. Morning sunlight streamed through the front windows, casting long golden lines across the worn wooden floor. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, mixed with warm bread, filled the air, creating the familiar atmosphere that had welcomed the neighborhood every single day for more than 15 years. Behind the counter stood Naomi Brooks, a hardworking black woman whose kindness had become just as much a part of the community as the store itself. She greeted every customer with a warm smile and remembered details that most people forgot. She knew which veteran preferred black coffee before sunrise, which single mother always stopped in after her night shift, and which high school students spent their allowance on snacks before football practice to everyone who walked through her doors. Naomi wasn't just a business owner. She was someone who genuinely cared. Owning a small business had never been easy. Rising costs, shrinking profits, and long hours had become part of her daily routine. Most mornings began before sunrise, stocking shelves, checking deliveries, and preparing fresh coffee before the first customer arrived. Many nights ended well after dark as she balanced receipts and swept the floors herself. Even during difficult months when money was tight, she refused to lower her standards or treat anyone unfairly. Her reputation had been built through honesty, patience, and years of hard work, earning the respect of families throughout the neighborhood. That afternoon seemed no different. Parents stopped in to buy groceries on their way home from work. An elderly couple chatted quietly near the bread aisle. A delivery driver grabbed a bottle of water before heading back on the road. The peaceful rhythm of the store reflected the kind of community Naomi had spent years helping to build. Then the atmosphere changed. 3 uniformed police officers walked through the entrance together. Conversations immediately grew quieter. Several customers instinctively glanced toward the officers before quickly looking away. Their heavy footsteps echoed across the floor as they moved confidently toward the counter. The officer leading the group carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected complete obedience wherever he went without asking permission. He placed his coffee cup on the counter and leaned forward, studying Naomi with a smile that felt more like a warning than a greeting. "Afternoon," he said casually. Naomi returned a polite smile. "Good afternoon, officers. What can I help you with today?" The officer looked around the store before lowering his voice, just enough that nearby customers could still hear every word. "We're here to help keep businesses like yours safe." Naomi remained silent, waiting for him to continue. He tapped his fingers against the counter. 5,000, she blinked once. "I'm sorry," he smiled wider. "Protection money, pay it every month and business stays smooth. No surprise inspections, no permit problems. No unnecessary headaches for several seconds." The store became completely silent. A customer holding a basket of groceries slowly lowered his eyes. Another quietly stepped away from the checkout line, pretending to examine a nearby shelf. No one spoke. No one challenged the officers. Fear had already taught the neighborhood that silence was often safer than questions. Naomi studied each officer carefully. She noticed the confidence in their posture, the relaxed expressions on the younger officers' faces, and the certainty that no one inside the store would dare object. They weren't behaving like public servants protecting the community. They acted like men, convinced that the law existed only for everyone else. She calmly folded the small towel she had been using to clean the counter and placed it neatly beside the register. Then she looked directly at the senior officer. Her voice remained steady. "I've always believed that a police badge represents service, integrity, and the responsibility to protect honest people. My father taught me to respect law enforcement, because good officers sacrifice every day to keep families safe." The officer's expression barely changed. Naomi continued, "So, I'd like to ask one question, before this conversation goes any further." She glanced briefly at the badge on his chest, before meeting his eyes again. "Is what you're asking part of your department's official policy, or is this your own decision?" The 3 officers looked at one another for a brief moment before laughter filled the small store. It wasn't the kind of laughter that came from amusement. It was the confident laughter of people who believed they had never been challenged and never would be. The senior officer leaned closer across the counter, his smile fading into something colder. "You ask too many questions," he said quietly around here. "People who ask questions usually end up with bigger problems than they started with." Naomi didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze, calm and composed, refusing to let fear speak louder than her principles. The officer straightened his uniform, picked up his coffee, and tapped the counter twice with his fingers. "You've got 3 days," he said. "After that, don't expect anyone to make things easy for you." Without another word, the 3 officers turned and walked out of the store, the doorbell ringing behind them as they disappeared into the afternoon sunlight. Only after their patrol car pulled away did the silence inside finally break. A middle-aged customer slowly walked toward the register. Avoiding eye contact, "You shouldn't have questioned them," he whispered. "People around here have learned that it's safer to stay quiet." Naomi offered him a gentle smile. Is staying quiet what made things better? The man lowered his head. He had no answer. After the last customer left, Naomi locked the front door earlier than usual and switched the sign to closed. She didn't rush. She turned off the coffee machine, counted the register, and straightened the shelves, exactly as she had done thousands of times before. Routine had always helped her think clearly. As the evening settled over the neighborhood, she stepped outside and slowly walked down the sidewalk. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking at storefront displays. She was studying faces. The bakery owner was closing nearly 2 hours earlier than he used to. The pharmacist looked exhausted as he locked his front door, glancing over his shoulder before walking to his car. Across the street, the owner of a small auto repair shop stood alone outside his garage, staring at an empty parking lot that had once been full of customers. Something was wrong. It wasn't one business. It was the entire block. Naomi crossed the street toward the repair shop. "Walter," she called softly. The older man looked up and forced a smile. "Evening, Naomi. You've been closing earlier every week." Walter shrugged. "Business has been slow." She studied him for a moment. "You've never lied very well." He looked away after several seconds of silence. He sighed deeply. "You really don't know." "Do you know what?" Walter glanced toward the street. "To make sure no police vehicles were nearby. They've been doing this for years." Naomi remained quiet. They started with small payments. "Said it was for protection." Then the amount kept growing. His voice became heavier with every sentence. "When I couldn't pay 1 month, health inspectors suddenly found violations that had somehow never existed before. I fixed everything they listed." He shook his head a week later. "They found something new. What happened after that?" Naomi asked. "My business never recovered." His words carried the weight of someone who had spent years blaming himself. "I wasn't the only one." He pointed toward the bakery. "They pressured them too. Then toward the pharmacy, they're barely surviving. The laundromat paid for months before the owner finally gave up and sold the place." Naomi listened without interrupting. Years earlier, she had learned that people reveal the truth when someone genuinely listens instead of preparing the next question. Walter continued. "Most of us tried reporting it to internal affairs." He nodded. "Every complaint disappeared. No investigation, none witnesses. They never called us back." His shoulders slumped eventually. Everyone stopped believing anyone would help. Naomi looked down the quiet street. Children were riding bicycles in the distance. Families carried groceries home. Neighbors waved to one another. From the outside, it looked like any peaceful American town. But beneath that ordinary picture lived something very different: fear. Not the kind created by criminals hiding in dark alleys. The kind created when the people trusted to enforce the law begin abusing the authority given to them. Naomi had always believed that a police badge represented honor. She still believed that, because she also knew thousands of officers across America risk their lives every day to protect complete strangers. Those men and women deserved respect. What she had encountered inside her store wasn't a reflection of law enforcement as a whole. It was the behavior of a few individuals who had forgotten the oath they once took. That difference mattered. Corruption succeeds when people begin believing every officer is the same. Integrity survives because good officers refuse to let the actions of a few define the many. Walter looked at her with tired eyes. "I wish someone had stood up years ago." Naomi answered gently. "Sometimes people stay silent because they think they're alone." He nodded slowly, and sometimes she looked back toward her little grocery store, standing quietly at the end of the block. All it takes is one person willing to tell the truth before others remember they aren't alone either. Walter managed the first genuine smile Naomi had seen from him in a long time. Before heading home, Naomi returned to her shop, through the back entrance. She walked into the small storage room where old filing cabinets, delivery boxes, and years of business records were stacked neatly against the wall. Everything appeared ordinary, just as it had for years yet as she stood there in the quiet, Her eyes settled on a dusty metal box tucked beneath a shelf, something she hadn't touched in a very long time. Naomi stood quietly in the small storage room. As the evening settled outside, the dusty metal box rested in her hands, carrying memories she had locked away years earlier. For a long moment, she simply stared at it before slowly lifting the lid. Inside lay a faded maroon beret, several military ribbons, a worn set of dog tags, and photographs from a chapter of her life almost no one in town knew existed. She gently picked up the beret, running her fingers across the fabric as memories rushed back. Not of glory, but of responsibility, sacrifice, and the weight of protecting innocent lives. For more than 2 decades, Naomi Brooks had served her country with honor. She had led some of the military's most demanding operations, where every decision affected lives. Her greatest lesson had never been about strength alone. It had been about discipline, patience, and knowing that real leaders never abuse the authority placed in their hands. That was why seeing a badge used to frighten hardworking citizens hurt her more deeply than any battlefield memory ever could. She carefully placed the beret back inside the box and reached for a secure satellite phone hidden beneath old business records. It was a number she had promised herself she would never need again. The call connected after a single ring. "This is Brooks." There was a brief silence before a familiar voice answered. "Commander, it's been a long time." Naomi looked toward the front of her quiet store. "I need lawful assistance. Possible organized corruption involving multiple public officials. I have witnesses' security footage and victims willing to cooperate." The voice on the other end immediately became professional. "Understood, don't confront anyone. Preserve every piece of evidence. We'll coordinate with the proper federal authorities." "I expected that answer. You trained us well." The call ended. Naomi spent the next 2 days doing exactly what she had always done best, remaining calm while preparing carefully. She backed up every security recording from the store's cameras. She documented dates, times, and conversations. Several neighboring business owners quietly agreed to provide statements after learning they would be protected by independent investigators. Word spread carefully through trusted channels. Good people had finally found someone willing to stand beside them. 3 days later, shortly after noon, the familiar patrol car rolled into the parking lot. The same 3 officers stepped out, wearing the same confident expressions. Lieutenant Rick Dalton pushed open the store door without knocking. "I assume you've made the smart decision?" Naomi stood behind the register, exactly where he had left her 3 days earlier. "I've made the right decision." Dalton smiled good. He extended his hand, the envelope. Naomi calmly folded her hands together. "There won't be one." His smile disappeared. Around the store, several customers quietly stopped shopping. One elderly veteran looked toward the entrance. A young mother instinctively held her son's hand. The room grew silent. Dalton took one slow step forward. "You really don't understand how this ends." Before Naomi could answer, the sound of multiple vehicles echoed outside. Black SUVs rolled onto the street one after another. Unmarked federal vehicles marked state police units. Investigators wearing jackets with federal identification stepped onto the sidewalk, followed by senior law enforcement officials carrying sealed folders. The lead federal investigator entered the store, Lieutenant Rick Dalton. Dalton turned visibly confused. "Yes, you and your associates are being detained, pending an investigation into allegations including extortion, abuse of authority, obstruction, and conspiracy." The confidence drained from every face. "This is ridiculous," Dalton protested. The investigator calmly held up a warrant. "We also have recorded evidence." Another investigator carefully collected the store surveillance system, while additional officers respectfully interviewed witnesses who had voluntarily remained inside. Within minutes, more investigators arrived at the local police department, executing search warrants approved through the proper legal process. Honest officers inside the department cooperated fully, helping investigators identify records and evidence that exposed years of misconduct by a small group who had betrayed both the public and the badge they wore. As neighbors gathered outside Brooks Market, many watched in disbelief. Some cried quietly, others simply stood in silence. For years they had believed no one would ever listen. Naomi stepped outside as investigators continued their work. One young police officer approached her respectfully. "Ma'am," he said, "I just wanted to thank you." She looked at him with quiet curiosity. "For what? For reminding people that corruption isn't law enforcement." He glanced toward the officers helping investigators. "Most of us joined this profession to protect our communities. People like those men make everyone forget that." Naomi nodded. "A badge is a symbol of public trust." The good officers who honor the trust deserve the respect they've earned. Accountability doesn't weaken law enforcement. It protects its integrity. The young officer smiled proudly before returning to his duties. Over the following weeks, businesses slowly reopened with renewed hope. Families returned to shopping without fear. Walter's repair shop welcomed customers again. The bakery extended its hours. The pharmacy no longer closed. Before sunset, Brooks Market became more than a neighborhood store. It became a reminder that courage is often quiet. Integrity is stronger than intimidation, and one determined person can inspire an entire community to stand together. Naomi never asked for recognition. She simply unlocked her store every morning just as she always had, greeting customers with the same warm smile that had earned their trust. Years before, some heroes wear uniforms. Some wear aprons. What matters is the character beneath them.